My name's Larry Selman. Welcome to the G.I. Joe Classic Collection chat. Happy to see you all here. My background as I was a professional illustrator before I got into G.I. Joe, so I was doing book covers for all kinds of stuff, mostly Westerns, but I've done a lot of things. So started out with doing paperbacks, wound up doing Jurassic Park, then VR Troopers, then the G.I. Joe. So
one of the things most people don't know is how the 3 3/4 inch to the classic collection are linked. So when I did, when I presented the concept for the first time, the direction was based on 3 3/4 inch G.I. Joe. So the pictures you're seeing behind there, I presented in Rhode Island at a time we were moving in another direction. It was the attempt to get Sergeant Savage. It was the attempt to do more realistic looking figures. And I was too late on the Hall of Fame version of them. So this was the basis for the 12-inch line, and my goal was to put on, show realistic figures. And the other thing we did is there were things we liked about both figures, and so the idea was how do you combine them to make one figure? And Bill Young put the bunny ears on there. I took it off and put the skis. So. We went through a number of different iterations. The first drawing, though, I don't know if Vinny remembers it, that was done in Rhode Island. That was how I had, when we were talking at one time about adjusting the Hall of Fame into a 12-inch figure with some new articulation. You can see all the measurements, all the thing. We were really into it, and that is actually how it got to the smaller sketch, which became the big G.I. Joe. Rules were it had to have kung fu grip. A gentleman named Bob Kling was the head of sculpting. Tim Conroy and Jay Ferguson, who was also in sculpting, we were the ones who were proponents for certain movement, certain articulation, and the certain look of the figure. And that's, obviously that's what you got. I show you here the big fight. I did not want G.I. Joe to be just a collectible. I wanted to be a toy. My line was, kids who play with toys become collectors. We're all former little kids, and I still believe that. Management didn't like it. I got my ass hauled into somebody's office, and I was basically told to shut up. Stop doing that. And at the time, I'll give Vinny credit because he had shown the Timeless Collection, and they were looking to do more of the collectibles. I figured you got a collectible line, let's go with the toy line. And there's a figure I'll show you later. It was kind of my finger to management. So the first figure we did was based on a guy named Scott Morris. Even though he's a Marine, he turned into U.S. Army infantry, and he showed me a picture of a battle in Iraq, and the guy actually had his sleeves rolled up. They were just doing some lounging around, and they had an attack come in. And so Scott was telling me the story. Unfortunately, they turned it into short sleeves, but it was supposed to be rolled up, and they never really did this, and it was just kind of an ironic picture from Scott. So you can see with the input. Alana Klingensmith, who was in Rhode Island, did all the uniforms. No, did you see actual figures, or did you just see the pictures and drawings?
I just saw your drawings.
You just saw my drawings?
That's all I got.
Oh. So he took what I did and made this. And I'll let Larry talk about the painting there, and I'm going to ask a few questions now that I just learned.
Okay, so I got a phone call a few days before Christmas from Jim O'Brien, who was the art director, and said, we're going to bring back G.I. Joe for Toy Fair. If it's sold at Toy Fair to the buyers, we're in. I had G.I. Joe as a kid, and it was, once you get past the wow factor, I'm, a lot of pressure. But I only had a couple of weeks to do the illustration. Going away I was married at the time, going away to visit the in-laws, shortened that stay. Came home. I drafted the UPS driver as the model because I didn't have a lot of guys, and he had short hair. He looked like a guy who'd been in the military. And at that point, there was no airsoft, so I rented the weapons out of a place in New York. So it had to go to a firearms dealer because it was actually still considered a firearm. And then I could have it for 7 days. It had to go back. Anyways, it got the painting done. It was rushed, and there's things that you'd want to do it, but it worked well. Sold off on to the marketers.
So one of the things about the packaging was the box, the layout, and the idea was to have it tell the story on the outside, but continue the story on the inside. So if you look at the layout, Larry's layout, to which you see here, we wanted to tell the whole story as you opened it. So every part of his painting was used, even in the blue background. So that was part of the key of the packaging. I didn't put it in here, but I actually have the original drawings of the packaging we were proposing. But the painting would tell the whole story along with the inside story. Then we wrote as a team to go with the whole figure, thus making it, supposed to make it much more collectible. The first four figures, obviously you had the Australian ODF, and it's a World War II unit, special unit, that I was told still survives, and I talked to somebody in Australia who said it's real, and he talked to somebody in Australia at the base and said it wasn't real, so we really don't know the true story on it.
And we don't care.
The mistake we did on this one, I will say, is the hat. I wanted it molded. We were told we didn't have the budget to mold it because I was using up so much tooling on the other ones that we went with the fabric. And I wish if I could do it again, I would have put something in the material. Alana and I were trying hard and hard so it would fold better. Just couldn't get it to work. And unfortunately, that would be the big mistake we did on this one.
One of the things that, when Jim came to me and started talking about G.I. Joe, I said, my dad was in the military. If we're going to do this, I'm only going to do this, make the figure look correct. I'm not going to make it look like a toy. I had worked on Jurassic Park and I had worked on VR Troopers, and they were really toys. But to me, this was a little more personal because you're talking about real people, what their jobs do, and you need to have, like Kurt said earlier, a story for the whole picture. So that's why it's a lot more involved. And early on, I was not allowed to have an additional figure in the picture because the legal department decided, we're not selling more than one figure. There's a lot of things with the legal department. But, we got around it. We just sort of tested the market. We were like, we'll put an extra figure here. And nobody said anything. We put 2 more figures in. We'll test the market. And the legal department never said a word, so we just do what we wanted after that.
One thing I will bring up about the legal department, when Toy Story came out, and I had heard it was we caught wind of it, I wanted G.I. Joe to be Combat Carl. And our legal team would not, I just want to say his name, but would not let it happen. And I was bitter. The funny thing on that is then I think it's Sony or somebody did a commercial with Barbie and G.I. Joe in it, and the legal team wanted me to examine the video to see if we could sue them to take it off the air. And I'm like, I had a meltdown on that one, and I did not look at the video. I said, no, they did everything right. I don't know if it was right or not, but I was not going to take that off the air, and I still wish we had been in, if G.I. Joe had been in that movie instead of Combat Carl, that would have been just the next life, and it would have taken us off. So you said legal. I'm bitter on that one. This one was interesting because this got me both a call from the Pentagon and our legal department. I contacted Britain. If somebody had given me a number where I could get a hold of certain groups in the SAS, and they hung up on me, left me alone. I got a phone call from the Pentagon asking how I got the contact, who told me to ask the question, because I asked the right question. And it turned out the SAS just doesn't like certain involvement in like something like this. And needless to say, I got my ass handed to me by a colonel on the phone. And it was a very funny conversation. I still cherish it to this day because it was just one of those things where I did the right things and I still got yelled at. But the figure was, I was given information on the figure, what they would wear and all that, if ironically by the Brits again, and that's how I came up with the look. So the British actually helped me, but they wouldn't let me talk to an SAS soldier. Yeah. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, I would, go to the along as far as I could to get the equipment. This is the early days of the internet, if you want to call it that. I'm not really sure. But I called Britain, and there was a place called Sterling, and I got the uniform from Sterling. And the gun, the MP5,
yeah.
I made out of cardboard because the place that I was renting other stuff from, the movie prop house, didn't have an MP5, so I dummied it all up out of cardboard.
Yeah, they were helpful, but it just was ironic. We weren't supposed to be talking to them. So the Ranger, this one was very fun. I actually wanted to give him the parachute you see there. He was not supposed to be part of this line. It was originally supposed to be the sniper. And because the sniper, we'll get to him, we had some problems with him. We went with the Ranger. We dropped the parachute. The backpack that he comes with will open if you put a parachute in it, will fold properly. So that should fit in the backpack if I did the measurements right. And if you notice, I swear Larry painted 6 fingers on one of these guys. He's heard me say this before, and I still see it. But it's this is one of my favorite paintings you did. I don't know why.
Thank you.
But I'm going to take you to, and Vinny will tell you this, not everything goes right when you're putting stuff on the market. Take a look at the clouds. Yeah, it came in. It got signed off by some other people. I wasn't there. I caught it. We realized the mistake. Jim's laughing his ass off. Jim O'Brien thinks this is the funniest. And they did destroy all of them except for one. And that's the one there. I don't know where it is now. But it just shows you that there is, with the checks and balances, you'll catch the mistake, they happen, you live with it, and you work with it. In this case, we caught it. We did have to destroy a lot of packaging, but we did get it on time. So I'm going to go, here's the Marine. So I'll tell you a little story on this one. This shows you, again, the life of a concept and how far it can go. Mark Pennington, who was a figure designer two before me at Hasbro on the 3 3/4 inch, kept showing a figure in a ghillie suit. And they really couldn't get it to work to make it look good on the 3 3/4 inch. I got a hold of it, tried to bring it back on the 3 3/4 inch. It did not work. I then tried to do it on Hall of Fame. And in Hall of Fame, we had it all set up, but it kept falling apart. And you can't just have this thing shred to nothing. Fast forward to this era, and Alana Klingensmith told me about this fabric. She showed it to me. We played with it, put twigs in it, put leaves in it, put grass in it, and it held. And that's how it made it into the line 1 year later than I wanted, but it did make it in the line. You can see, look at the year on that. You can see how persistence paid off. And this is one of my favorite figures we did because it really works. We've seen people really deco it up and it looks good. And then Larry took it to this level.
Well, let's back up a little bit to the Halo one because,
Oh.
No, you don't have to back up. Well, I went down to Fort Bragg. So as we started working on these, I started to figure out the system for getting into the military, getting the military to help me because they had all the stuff and I didn't. So the Halo jumper actually went down to Fort Bragg, got into the wind tunnel, and they kept talking about Batman. Like, what? What's the big deal? I said, well, Batman, they said Batman was here the week before and they filmed this big Batman, sky scene and down there and they were all excited and I guess G.I. Joe wasn't as important to them, but okay. So we filmed it, we shot the reference down there, and then sometime after the package came out, I got a phone call from Jim. He said, you gotta watch the Rosie O'Donnell show today. Okay, so at the end of the show, they pulled everybody in the audience got G.I. Joes. So everybody was holding up a whole bunch of boxes. I'm like, well, there's my box. And it was pretty cool. It was very interesting to watch. And for the sniper, didn't get any help from the Marines. I either don't answer the phone or weren't interested. But I bought some books on snipers, made a ghillie suit, actually constructed the whole ghillie suit, and shot the reference, so I think it was pretty accurate. A lot of guys seem to like this picture and feel like, okay, you did it right. No one's ever complained. I used it a couple times at a Halloween costume contest, so.
It's funny he's going to bring that up. Here's the SAS. I'm talking about the troubles. You can't get a hold of the Marines, and the Marines love talking to me. And they were the ones who, told me about what to give him, what he should be carrying. They had 2 different rifles, 2 different spotter scopes. They were fantastic with me. They would tell me everything. In fact, they took me out to a base, and I got to fire a whole bunch of weapons and try things. So I don't know what it was, but I love dealing with the Marines, and everybody else has just bad stories from them, but they were great. Since you said TV, though, I will tell you this. If you ever go on and see G.I. Joe on TV, I don't know if anybody knows this, if you watch Third Rock from the Sun, look in the birdcage. The first figure was Robert Crippen. I think he was in there. There's a series of figures, G.I. Joes, that show up on Third Rock from the Sun, and I think it's in like the 3rd season. And every week I would send him G.I. Joes. and he would put them in the show. So the cold weather was a lot of fun. I called up a base up in Alaska, and I talked to a sergeant up there. And the only thing he said is, if you're going to build this figure, he's got to have long johns. That's the one thing he insisted, because he goes, man, you have no idea how much we live in these up here. They're under everything you're wearing during the wintertime. So thus, that's why the long johns were so included. But he kept sending me pictures of the different equipment and how they wore it, why they wore it. He just taught me a lot, wouldn't stop. He called me up a number of times. And so we sent them a case of figures as a thank you to the base up there. And I wish I could remember which one I was talking to. But they were these guys were great help on this figure. And I think Larry's painting captures all with that mist coming out of his mouth.
Well, this is the first box that I tried sticking an extra figure in, and trying to get some extra equipment. So there's a lot of I'll talk about this model a little later, because I found him at a Kmart bake sale. He was actually in the Army, but I'll save that for later.
That's not the homeless guy?
No, it's not the homeless guy. We didn't use any of the homeless guys.
So the Blue Angels was a lot of fun. One I learned is anybody can use the Blue Angels logo, anybody can use their colors. Anything about the Blue Angels is public domain because they're part of the government. And anything the government does is public domain, except somehow the Marines, but even then you can get around it. But yeah, anything the government uses, and I've been told even Amtrak is actually public domain because it's run by the U.S. government.
Yep.
And I learned that through the Blue Angels, who said, yeah, we can't stop you from doing this. And I was like, well, I don't want you to stop me. I want you to help me. And once, I can't think of the guys, it was Dino was the one guy I talked to. He was number 6, I think, on the team, or 5 on the team, excuse me. And then Captain Kirby, or Colonel Kirby, something like that. Kirby. The spokesman was Kirby. These guys were fantastic. They gave me all the information down to the cut, down to even where the logo is placed. They actually supplied me with all the logos, and I can't thank them enough, because I wouldn't want to have to find that. They were fantastic to work with. They offered me a flight. I did turn it down because I knew I wouldn't last a second in there. Larry's like, no, they want to make you throw up, and these guys were like actually happy I didn't take the flight. If you're gonna, that was like, man, you bank first, I'm gone. And they're like, they don't need that. They want to work for it, I guess. So, but they were a fantastic group to work with. I'm showing you. I've got a hold of these, and I love these. Larry's thoughts. What's in his head is right there.
Yeah, if you notice the first sketch of had AODF, it was a lot more detailed. At this point, I started doing simpler sketches. Didn't want to waste a lot of time on complicated sketches. Wasn't sure what I was going to get when I went to see the Blue Angels, because I went down to hang out with the Blue Angels. If you want good reference, you make your phone call. Hey, we're going to be in town. This is when we practice. This is the days you can come down. Got on a plane, went to Pensacola, spent the day with the Blue Angels. When I started shooting the reference, I figured out a better picture than the sketches. And the guy was there, Commander Bear was very cooperative. He sat in the cockpit, the very warm cockpit, for a few minutes, and we took all the reference I needed, painted this picture. It won an award from the American Society of Aviation Artists, and I didn't belong to the American Society of Aviation Artists.
Now, I'll tell you a really cool story about the Angels. So I was in Cleveland, Ohio, went up there to meet them, hand them the figures, and they were at the air show. And during the air show, my son was about 6 months old and was not happy with the noises coming out of the planes. And if you've ever seen the movie True Lies, where you see the plane fly the building and it looks fake, in downtown Cleveland, there was some guy who looked out the window and watched one of the Hornets go by. They flew one of the planes below the top of the building. And it looked like True Lies. It just looked fake. It looks like somebody took a model and put it through there, because it just didn't look, your mind couldn't comprehend it. That was sweet. I wouldn't have seen that if my son hadn't cried, because we would have been too far away. They're not supposed to do that, but I guess what my understanding is they got clearance.
Yeah, they'd have to.
Yeah.
Before you jump off, the full plane you see here is a plastic model. I built plastic models as kids, scale them up, scale them down for whatever I need. And then the city back here is a conglomeration of a couple different places. Part of it's Pittsburgh, part of it's Baltimore, part of it's someplace else. And if you got real close to it, you'd see it's just a bunch of paint squiggles. But you know, people like the fact that you could see the reflection of the one plane going to the left and the other plane going to, and you could see the full plane going to the right. I went to a show and watched the entire show, filmed it, and decided this would make a good, good
Tough
scene.
life, you know.
Yeah.
Is that the igloo in the picture?
Yep. That's the igloo.
It's go boom. They blew it up.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a little bit different. This is the Tuskegee Airmen. This was great. I love these guys. I've got to meet a lot of them over the years. So Alan Hassenfeld said he wanted us to do the Tuskegee Airmen. And I'll be honest, I knew who the 92nd Infantry was. I knew a couple people who served in the 92nd Infantry. That's the Buffalo Soldiers during World War II. I knew squat about the Tuskegee Airmen. And boy, did I get some good lessons. So when we got this assignment, there happened to be a chapter in Cincinnati who said they would help us out. And which one we got up here? We got the fighter pilot. So the one thing about this, one of the guys said to us, "Don't do the American uniform. Do the British camel hair." And I had no idea what he was really talking about. And what he pointed out was when they got over there, not all their uniforms made it over to the seas because it was better for the white pilots to have it. Not all of them really were in good condition. It's better for the white pilots to have it. And the British, who just wanted somebody up there fighting with them, said, "Yeah, here, we'll give you some uniforms." So these guys insisted we do it a certain way. And thus, that's the color you saw. That's a desert camel hair uniform. And again, I didn't ever, you're learning this on the fly. The equipment, we wanted it as authentic as possible, and these guys were checking all our stuff, and it was really, really awesome. You could, it came out nice. The thermoses was something, I don't know why we decided to do the thermoses out of everything.
Could you take it up in the bomber?
Yeah,
To try
but
to
I
get
don't know why
something
we
warm.
picked that one item.
Yeah.
So we all thought it was fun. It was to interact. Even though Hasbro had the management I was working under at Cincinnati did not want me to do toys, I wanted finger food and I wanted it to be playability. So I'm sure Bob Lindsay is the one who did that drawing, and so he was really insistent on having that in the figure. Before I get to that. So the other thing I'll tell you about it, though, is once it was going to Larry, the idea, I don't know if you were part of the decision on how to do the painting and all that, I mean, the boxes together.
No, it was Jim's idea.
Yeah, so we met with the packaging department. Jim's like, we can't just do one thing. So Jim is selling me the idea, Karen Lehman the idea, and was just one of these things where we're going to have one giant painting, thus why we have the two boxes lined up, which led to a lot of other thinking on how we can do this. So I'll let Larry take it from here on the figures, and I got a couple stories on this one.
Backstory on this, the Blue Angels was on the schedule ahead of these guys. And then Alan came and said, "Hey, we want 2 packages." This is the story I was told. 2 Blue Angel packages. 2 Tuskegee packages, bomber pilot and fighter pilot. And so we had to wash out the Blue Angel picture. I called a friend of mine who was a big World War II reenactor, had a lot of Air Corps, had original Tuskegee uniforms, all the equipment I needed. He said, "We'll go down to Leesburg, we'll go to the airport, we'll post it, we'll get you some models." He took 2 guys from the Washington Redskin Band, okay, because he was a musician. They showed up with big fuzzy mustaches. Always a winner when you got to figure out what the guy looks like without a mustache. And we walked around the Leesburg airport like we owned the place, except Brooks didn't tell those guys that we were doing it. So the manager comes out and runs us out. However, the bomber pilot guy, you ever see the people that like pose in the mirror and look at themselves? That's all that guy did for like an hour. He just walked around the airport posing, looking himself around, pose, all kinds of different poses. The fighter pilot, well, we shot his reference pretty quickly. We needed other stuff going on in a picture, and this is where the importance of having extra figures and vehicles in a painting paid off because it give you the big sense of an airfield, planes coming in. Now, normally you don't put bombers and fighter planes together like we did here, but when you separated them, it was the only way to do the box. This picture was in the 100th anniversary of flight at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Of the 60 paintings that were there, 30 of them were from the civilian side. So it's one of 30 paintings that made it in a giant collection of paintings. The Air Force had, at that point, I think 50,000 paintings, and they culled through theirs for their half. And we got this painting in, which I thought was a huge deal. It was supposed to be at the Air and Space Museum, but the Air and Space Museum kind of crapped on that. Okay, the last thing. The ground crew guy walking along, and the guy in the middle of the two other pilots over here. Yeah. No, that guy, yeah. That's actually Brooks, because I didn't have any African-American guys, and I couldn't get these guys out of the gear because we were getting run out. So we went off and did all kinds of other stuff. He jumped on I have pictures of him, jumping on a fence like he's on an airplane and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So I use figure reference for everything I do. So every figure you see here, I'm going to try to get as much original or accurate equipment as I can.
So one of the things I'll tell you about the Tuskegee Airmen, these guys were great. I can't say enough about helping them. The engineer on all my products was a gentleman named Clarence Winston. Unfortunately, Clarence isn't with us anymore, and Clarence is black. So this is key to the story because he did two stupid things to me. We went into the meeting with the Tuskegee Airmen, and my son, who was about, again, 6 months old at the time, is sitting there. And we walk into the room about this size. And what we were going to do is they asked us to read the story of the Tuskegee Airmen to them, not just send it to them, but to read it, because they wanted to hear it, they wanted to critique it. So we sit down on this pew, and holding my son, this lady sits in front of us, and Clarence, without missing a beat, goes, "Hey, look at all the chocolate people." This woman turned around and looks at us. "Don't you go teaching him that." And I'm thinking, I'm going to get my ass handed to me, and he's going to get me killed. So everybody else shows up, and Clarence and I had flipped a coin on who was going to read this up there, and I really wanted to. I was really proud I wrote most of it, and I was really proud of this. Clarence starts reading it, and he gets to the line, "These African-American men." The room erupted. And the best thing was happening while these guys were starting to get mad was my son was pooping. And I had an excuse to get out of this room because Clarence is up there by himself, and these guys are mad because they aren't African-American, they're American. And one guy was Australian. So you're sitting there like, holy crud, I don't know what happened. I was out of the room changing his diaper, so for 10 minutes, I have no idea what happened in the room. It was calmed down, and Clarence was apologizing. I am so happy my son was there to do that for me. So yeah, they were great. It was really funny. But yeah, hearing the stories and what they wore, how they wore it. So, and we showed them Larry's painting later. They loved it. So they were really behind what we were doing on the whole thing. Let's see, I'm gonna flip here. So yeah, this was a very fun project to work on. Hey, Vinny, I got to ask you, did you guys get any of this? Did they ask you to do any of this, the Tuskegee? Oh, okay. Because I was told you were going to be a part of this, and then I never heard anything. Okay. The next gentleman up, I can't say enough, this is Francis S. Curry. He was a Medal of Honor recipient during the Battle of the Bulge. I think it was right after Malmedy. And he was great help. I learned so much about what happened other than what he did, but what the soldier's life was like over there. He did receive the Medal of Honor for saving a number of soldiers. He checked all of my drawings. He checked all the equipment I was handing him. So this was a very interactive project, and I loved it. This is Francis. He joined the military at the age of 17, so he was underage when he started. And I think he was 18 when, or 19 when he got received his medal.
I think he's 18.
18, yeah. So he was, if he tells the story officially, he was 19 when he received it, but he was actually 1 year too young to be in the military. He joined up early. He shows you the equipment in front. So he sent me all these photos of the equipment in front. I bet you have a copy of the same ones. And then this is Larry. Who wrote the notes? So I'm going to let you take over.
That's all Francis Curry. So the value of being able to talk to a veteran who's not too old, his memory's still sharp and very clear. He doesn't things don't get muddled as much. So he drew the map and the key, and we talked on the phone several times. And I recorded all the phone conversations, took notes too, and then proceeded to start working on the picture. I think you got some other slides of the sketches.
Yeah, this is cool.
Okay. So I would work. This is not the normal working method for me because it was a longer story, and I'm trying to figure out exactly where I want to put Francis and how I want it to be. So I would talk to him, send him some stuff, and he would like, yeah, this or that. And he'd make, we all kind of make comments. And go ahead. And so I would go through more detailed drawings like this, send them down to him, and we'd talk about it. And then we settled on this one. He had a picture of the factory, and this was, if you read the story, at this point, there's a factory. His guys huddled up in a factory when the Germans came down the road, and there was a house across the street. An Army lieutenant got killed. There was a half-track out front, and eventually he winds up near this house. After I showed him the painting, he said, how did you do this? I said, well, you sent me a picture of the factory. I went and built the little factory, and then built the little house. He says, well, that's exactly what it looked like. He was very happy with that. I got a guy. I hunted for a model that looked like him. It's a lot easier when the guy looks like him or close to him. Was walking around with this picture all the time going, well, and a helmet. I had a helmet in my car. So I'm going to into Kmart, and there was this group of people outside doing a bake sale, and they were in the Army. I'm not sure why they were doing a bake sale. He was there. This guy was there, Trey Rhodes. And I walked over to him, and I started talking to him. I showed him the picture, told him all about it. Of course, they think you're nuts or there's something wrong with you because it's really out of the left field. It's completely, bizarro to them. Very quiet man. Turned out to be one of the best models I ever had. I gave him the BAR. He did exactly, I didn't really have to pose him. He was also the cold weather guy. He was also the Marine Recon guy. Every time I needed him to do something, just show him a sketch, okay, and went right to it, which is, a little unusual. Most of the time when you get a guy that talks a lot or something, they can be good models or they can be horrible models, but most of the time when you get a quiet guy, they're usually very stiff. But Trey was great.
And the painting came out fantastic. I recommend you look up the story of how he received his Medal of Honor. But we got a couple stories from him. One, he told me afterwards. So when this took place, but as they're getting the wounded into the Jeep, they didn't have an American Jeep. They had a German Jeep. And they had to get behind their lines. And he said as they were going back, they've got the soldiers on there. I met one of the guys that was wounded in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And that he saved. It was on the back he was laying on the back. There was a guy on the front. And then you got the rest of the troops that were with him. And they realized they've got to get across their lines with a German Jeep. And obviously the headlights, you can tell the difference and all that. And it was just, they got close to the lines and they started screaming and yelling, don't shoot us, we're Americans. But he said he had never been, that was the most scared he was during the battle. Because he said while this took place, he was just kind of blindly doing it. There was a second person who was with him who was vaporized. The guy who was feeding him the bazooka shells, and the guy disappeared. And I finally had to ask what happened to him, and he told me. And so these kind of stories were very fascinating to learn from him. He came back from Germany with a Ruger, and there's where the story kind of gets a little weird because he told me during one of the incidents, he was either coming around the corner by a sewer, saw a German and dropped. The guy opened fire and hit his backpack. He fired back, killed the guy, and collected the Luger. And I've seen the Luger, and I've touched it. But when he told later that it was raining, he opens his backpack, and what the guy shot was his poncho, and he was getting rained on still because it was uncovered. Larry's got a different story on this one.
Later on, they liberated a concentration camp full of women, and most of them had died. within a day or two of them liberating the camp. And the war they got a message the war was going to end. And they were kind of just loitering around this camp, not moving, not trying to get engaged in combat. And he noticed an MP in a house. Was kind of standing in the doorway, all proud of himself, doing this kind of stuff. So he said, I just lined up on the doorway, and when he walked into the doorway, I dropped him. I walked over to where he was at, and then picked up his Luger and put it in my pack, and moved on. And at the camp, he picked up the cat of nine tails that the SS guards used to beat the women with. He gave the cat of nine tails and the Luger to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. That's the story he told me.
Now the Luger's actually not. He did. He loaned it, and it's up in. I think it's on the Yorktown now.
Okay, but it's either here nor there. He picked up a Luger from a dead German. That's the bottom line. So
the card is a card he signed for me, and the box, the actual box he signed for me, also is it's only a couple things I have from this line. You see a few things, but that one I treasure that. For talking to him. He was a great guy. I wish I could meet more people like him. D-Day salute, the head comes from two places, and you'll hopefully, if we have time, I'll see it later. I'm going to go a little faster. But, yeah, I got together with some military reactors, actual war veterans, and they helped me put this together. And the weird part was when I started to learn the different uniforms they would wear during these battles. Some of it they were getting from scratch. It was just kind of fascinating. We always think of the military as a really tight thing, but these guys were scrambling to get things done. And I was joking with Larry about even the tent. It's two guys. Your second partner's missing. You don't have a full tent. You got to find somebody else who had somebody killed, so you have two tents together. The two halves together. These, we always think of, man, they must have been really good, really organized and all that. And it was a lot of chaos at a lot of times. And these guys, when I would talk to the veterans, would tell me about the chaos. So when I did the D-Day salute, it was from talking to a few of the veterans who had been on Normandy. And that's actually where it came from. The paper, people ask me, why the Tribune? Because I'm from Chicago. And I asked the Times, and they wouldn't give me a copy of the day, so I actually I called Chicago up, said I'm from Chicago. She goes, sure, didn't charge me for it. So we had the actual press from it. And then Larry's drawings, I love this one. I really do.
For this picture, I had to work around the flag design. I had to make sure I had a good painting that opened up, told the whole story, wasn't too gory. I think everybody's familiar with this opening scenes in Saving Private Ryan. Do we do this before Saving Private or after?
Just before.
Just before. So, I had some guys I knew that were in World War II, did the first wave or not first wave, but they would be either in the 1st Division or they would have been in the 29th Division. I didn't know any 4th Division guys, but they all had similar stories if you could get them to talk about it, or you could, more you could read about it. And the guys were very reluctant even at that point to talk about it because it's an experience they don't want to relive. But the biggest challenge for this was really just the design part. The rest of it was, well, what kind of good piece of reference can I get, and where do I want it to go?
Tell you, one of the guys who gave us some of the stories on this he was one of I think the second wave. I think I was telling you this the other day. Mortar went off and knocked over one of the obstacles, and it landed on him just out of the water, and the water is lapping up, and he is trapped while bombs, bullets, and everything are flying around him. He missed almost the entire battle stuck under that thing. They couldn't dig him out. And he, unharmed, uninjured, not a nick, but he witnessed the entire battle from sitting on the beach, watching it in this position, he said, upside down. And he saw the entire, that was a great story, But the one thing, and Larry will tell you the same thing, is on this line, we got to talk to so many soldiers, you meet them, you hear the stories. You always hear the glorified stories. When you get to the grunt stories, it's very different. It's a lot more fun, so you can throw things into the figures. Washington, I talked to the museum, I talked to a number of people on this. we were paying attention to the cut of the uniform. Today's pants are cropped, so when you sit down, it slides nicely around your ass. Theirs always hung down low like MC Hammer because they didn't have that kind of sewing technique yet. So they were always baggy, and so we made sure the crotch was lower, things like that.
You said you talked to Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon, we talked to two museums, to Mount Vernon, we talked to the Smithsonian, we talked to, I'm trying to think who the other one was. One of the universities had some information for us, and that's how we got the sculpt done right. We were actually, they gave us, what is that called, the mask, death mask. They gave us some images of it, real tight. They wouldn't send it to us, or they don't sculpt in it anymore. But yeah, so that's how we got the image of what we have. One of the guys, Nick Langdon, was a big Revolutionary War reenactor, and he was a big part of this figure coming to life and how we did it.
What's the middle picture?
The clear?
Yeah, the gold.
That's his ponytail. That's what it would look. That's what the model looked like when it came out. So you're seeing a hand-painted model, the hand-sewn uniform, even down to the notes that were going back and forth. That was again Alana Klingensmith did this for us. And so, again, that's what's kind of interesting. What did Larry see versus what he didn't see?
Well, these are just sketches for you work out your ideas. I mean, you think you're going to go one direction, you go, oh, this works, this doesn't work, and you needed a big army. That was kind of the thing. But for this one, you might notice on this side here, the differences between the two. The one on the bottom was how I thought the design was supposed to be, and as it was related to me from Jim O'Brien. I thought the flag was going to be the similar design of the D-Day box, and as it turns out, the flag opened the other way. So the flag was flying the other way. So when you put the two flags together, the two boxes together on the store shelf, you had the World War II flag and the American Revolutionary War flag. That's why that design was like that. And I shot reference 3 different times to make this work. I went to Philadelphia twice and spent at least $2,000 on reference, and that was a lot of money back then. Didn't work. Finally broke down and rented some uniforms and just started shooting reference on my own, which, while costly, I had more control over who the models were, what they looked like, and what they were doing. And then you put the picture together. It's not specific place. It's more toward Norfolk. When people ask me, I'm like, well, it's Norfolk. They're going toward the end of the war. Virginia, Yorktown, all that kind of stuff. Because early on in the war, the Army was pretty ragged. They didn't look as nice and neat as this. They didn't march very well. So yeah, in the end, all the hard work and all the extra work, I thought really paid off on this picture because it looks and feels authentic, not toy-like.
Though I did want to put finger food in there and make it more toy-like. So this one, Mitchell Page, is very interesting. I talked to Mitchell many times. He sent me his book, A Boy Named Mitch. The Marines were the ones who recommended him to me for World War II. And there's a bit of controversy on what he did and how he did it at the battle. The only thing I really can say consistently out of him is that he tried to enlist and he was 17. They turned him away. He had to walk all the way back home, and it was from it's in Charleroi, Pennsylvania to Baltimore. They rejected him, and he had to walk home and go back the next year when he turned of age. So Larry talked to him too, and he was an interesting individual.
He was definitely an interesting guy. The reason he has short sleeves is because he said he was having trouble throwing grenades, so he cut the sleeves off of his HBT shirt.
And I was giving a difference in this too, is the story I heard from Mitch. Again, these guys are older guys and they kind of embellish sometimes, but I was always told he held it here. He said he never held it to me. I figured you talked to him and it was right, so we don't know which is the right answer. I was just told that he blistered up here. He had his some rag there and he was getting blisters. So we're really not sure on the actual story of what happened on that one at this point. I'm not, at least.
I showed him the sketch. He was okay with it. Sent him the image of the painting. He was unhappy because he said he held on to the pintle, which wouldn't have been what Kurt's describing. Charlie Waterhouse, who was a Marine painter back probably during a little later during World War II, painted it a completely different way, painted the way Kurt had it described it. So which way is it? He may have done all three. Who knows? I mean, it's combat. Things happen pretty fast. I mean, although honestly, I thought it was a little weird. He said he had, held it by the jacket, which you wouldn't do because it's way too hot.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that was consistent in all the stories is if you ever seen the movie Private Ryan toward the end and the bullets are flying all around him, the ground's being chewed up, anybody who witnessed this will tell you they didn't have any clue how he didn't get blown away. There were bullets and everything was flying and he's jumping up and never got touched, never got nicked. And the story. When I heard the story from other people and I read about it, it just didn't seem real.
This is Edson's Ridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they said it was just
Right.
being littered. So glad you remembered the name of the ridge. I was sitting there going blank.
Well, I had a friend who was at Edson's Ridge as a machine gunner.
Did he see it?
I don't know if we never talked about that. He would rarely talk about anything in Edson's Ridge.
So the Force Recon, this one was, again, the Marines came to me. I was out in Indianapolis. They had flown me out to one of the bases, and they were the ones coming to me and saying, we should do something like this. We should do a Force Recon. And it's basic figure, so I'll let Larry talk about it because it's more about the painting than, in this case, the figure.
Oh, yeah. I really enjoyed this painting because it reminded me of the Westerns I used to do. And got to use a lot of cool colors. Took two guys who were in EMPs. Let's go out here and, pose. We had some other guys come around and check us out. What are you doing with weapons out, and all kinds of rules and regulations for the military. And the armorers get very nervous if you have weapons that are not signed out. But this is all in the legit
jump
stuff.
ahead here.
Go ahead.
So we did a female figure. The body was based on my ex-wife, seriously, because she was a little hippie. And we had her pose a couple times. I don't have the photos, but they put on a bodysuit on her. And what they did is the guy who was going to do the sculpt actually drew on her, on the suit, so they could see how to make the folds work, because we didn't want to do a Barbie. We didn't want to do the G.I. Joe from the nurse. So, yeah, it was kind of interesting. They put this bodysuit, flesh-colored thing on her, and then started drawing on it, how to break it up. Again, you can see all the marks where I'm telling the sculptor what I want, how I want it handled. And it came out to this. And so you didn't get the big sexy figure, you got a real figure. And that was a big part to us. Dave Dorman's the person who did the painting on this, but we wanted a more realistic figure. And we actually met with a helicopter pilot. She was the one who suggested what she carried on there. So it was nice that the Army was really willing to help us with a lot of these items. And when we were doing the female, they were kind of strict on make sure you don't make her look like she's sexified like they do in the movies, make her look a bit more real. They really asked us to do that, and so we stuck to it. You can see the work and the componentry that goes into the detail of these things. We were sent drawings. I had to sit there and measure some of this stuff, so it's, it was fun because you got to play with it. Same with the 82nd Airborne.
I just want to thank you for that, by the way. That's one of my favorite figures. And
Which one?
the female.
Oh,
It's
you're welcome.
Well done, thank you.
This was done after I was gone. I did all the drawings, I did all the arc, I did all the input, and they did this far after I was gone. So they were still doing some of the figures I created into the future, but this is what could have been. You can see the uniform. That was by Alana Klingesmith, and I actually handmade the mask, all the welding equipment. I had put a sparker in it so that you get a little spark on the welding. I don't know if that's what killed it or what killed it, but this is one of the ones that got my ass handed to me because, again, I was trying to make it a toy. And you'll notice a theme on this one. We looked at M&Ms. My son was going to be a G.I. Joe. And if you look at the head sculpt, that's the sculpt you see in the World War II figures, D-Day. So it gives you the timeline. We were also looking at Old Spice. Old Spice, remember the bottle with the sailor and the whistling down the street? I had the whole thing done, the commercial. You were going to get, I had already talked to Procter & Gamble. You were going to get a bottle of Old Spice, the figure, all the stuff. This was more of where were you going to do a different kind of collector item. And I don't know why, I know it died with a fizzle, We had models made, we had everything, but it died with a fizzle because I just couldn't get anybody to buy on at the end. And it would have rocked. We wanted to do it, we looked at Nordstrom's, Macy's, a couple of more higher end stores to give it to with the Old Spice bottle. We thought then you could do it without it, and just was not allowed. The M&M, I think this one fizzled just because they M&Ms didn't want to do it. They didn't want to be associated to G.I. Joe. I understand that. Campbell's Soup we looked at, that didn't go anywhere. I found out, I think some of these did come out later, but this, I had come up with the Battle of the Bulge, the Marine Paratrooper, and the colors are off. This was just, to show people what we wanted to do. Just could have been. And Steve McQueen. I actually, is it you're going to remember, is this IMG or CMG, IMG, something like that, is the governing body, his agents. This was starting to get some traction, and it had something to do with the movie studio that we ended up stopping. We also looked at John Wayne from Iwo Jima, and again, it's not RKO owns it, it's somebody else, and that seemed to slow the whole process down. But these would have been great to put out. Again, this is a little bit different. We even wanted to put the movies in with them. We figured out the cost. We had the whole thing done, and it just kind of broke down. Yeah, most people have never seen this. I'll tell you a sad story on this one in a second. But yeah, we got this done in 6 months. So this, and then, Vinny's just looking at it and he's nodding because he knows that's fast for Hasbro. We had the whole thing done, the packaging, and at the last minute we got notice that they didn't feel this would be a good toy. Not Hasbro, but Spielberg. And it's too bad because this was a great looking figure. He's right here in front of me. But what also happened is I had 2 of these figures. I had one, the one up here was mine. And I had one in a mock-up box. He had a brown uniform. Everything was wrong. And when I moved one time, the moving company somehow shredded it. I mean, the figures were destroyed. They paid me $10,000 in compensation for it. But yeah, those 2 figures are gone forever. I had others, but those were gone. And but this was a lot of fun, this one, because I was given so much freedom to get a hold of weapons, get a hold of things, and check it out. And we got it done quick. This one, which is in front of me, it's right here in front of me, this was kind of to management because I was always told you couldn't do a toy. It can't be a toy, it can't be a toy. And I realized I could do a working parachute of the Golden Knights, and it works. We know it works. We actually contacted the company who makes them for the Golden Knights at the time. They sent us the drawings. They sent us a little more technical stuff to Alana. And so this chute, in every aspect, is authentically built to what they use. The figure you see in front of you was if anybody was in San Antonio, it was the figure that was dropped in the atrium. And I walked up, dropped the figure off the highest balcony. I think it's 5 floors up, something like that. And then it goes into a basement with an atrium of like a jungle. And there's all these bars. And this chair came out, what we did. So we put it back up, dropped it again. A bigger chair, and more people showed up with parachutes, and we started dropping parachutes down the middle of this atrium. The bar's filling up. This is along the Riverwalk in San Antonio. People are pouring in, watching it, and it's getting louder and louder. And about 10 o'clock, one patron in the hotel complained, and we had to shut the whole thing down. Since then, they've made a few drops. The Black Knights actually dropped him from an airplane with them, one of their drops. Really? Yeah. And the Golden Knights, and they were great. I mean, I wish I'd gotten the figure. They said it worked fine. Came down a lot slower than they did. And it landed a little farther away. But yeah, they did it during one of the shows, and they have a couple samples. He comes with 2 uniforms, the golden uniform and the black uniform.
Did they release it at the same height, or did they hold it for a while before they released it?
My understanding is he dropped it at about the time he released. He didn't want to get tangled in his uniform, so he was releasing, then let it go, and they said it didn't even come close to making it into their sales. But they did have to pay attention to that, obviously. They were fun. They called us up, and they were just giggling about how much fun they had with it, and they were happy we did it. I giggling at it because it's a toy. I play, you can throw it off a building, and it works. And it works well. So these are the kind of thing, I think that's the last one. Yeah, that I just always bring that with me because that's I got a lot of special to me, and it was one of the last I think it's one of the last figures I did when I was there, and, you know. So it was always a battle, unfortunately, like, we did the Civil War figures, which are in front of you, I don't show it. And no kidding aside, my wife is a small Chinese woman, and that Confederate soldier is hers. And every time we're in a store down south, she wants to buy a Confederate flag, and I am not kidding. She just likes to stick it to people. But yeah, the soldiers, Ron Rudat's actually the inspiration for these two figures. He really got me farther into the Civil War. So by the time we did it, it was kind of Ron who inspired me that we should do these figures. He's well aware of it too. And yeah, so these I'm proud of with the details. I mean, I've never done so many drawings for one figure than I did for these. So we got to cut. Well, I think we are over. But any questions? The only thing I would have done different, I will say this, is on how the figures are standing. I'm not sure which group did it, but they had a base like this, but they had a U shape underneath, which would work better than what I was doing, where I was sticking it up the back. They might have been the ones. Yeah. A couple other quick things. When doing this, and like Larry's talked to a lot of people. Some of the people I got to talk to while doing the line, which was great. I got to know Kitty Bradley, Omar Bradley's wife. And during that time, I would talk to her regularly a couple times a week. Nice lady. Definitely strict. I got to talk to Bob Hope and actually speak to Bob. And the way I met him, I got to talk to him, was I called up and his lawyer agent could mimic him really well. So they said, I'm going to talk to Bob. I said, sure. The lawyer, I thought it was the lawyer on the phone and made a comment. No, it was actually Bob Hope, and I got to talk to him for about 10 minutes. So that was a little bit fun. Got to talk to Colin Powell. He sounded like a kid. I said I was going to send him some of the preliminary samples so we could see how a toy's made, and I got, really? And I was just like, that was great. He was very much a gentleman. Buzz Aldrin, everybody gets to talk to him. No, he was very helpful. His daughter helped me get all the equipment. They were double checking all my drawings. So one of the things I got to say I liked was that I got to talk to a lot of people over the time. The other part that was really cool is how many times I referenced back to my first days at Hasbro, that I was able to bring thoughts that came back then forward, even to like I said, the Civil War, and you've got Ron Rudat's name coming up again. To me, that's really a cool part of it. It was a very different way to do things. It was a very different way of thinking. I may not have agreed with it, but it's before you, and I'd rather think of it that way than how it ended. Years later, I saw Teddy Roosevelt come out. I saw a number of figures that I actually had started, and I have the actual input drawings for it come out 2-3 years later. So, you know, it was kind of cool that my legacy lived on, but I would have rather it been more of a toy than it became one later, but by that time it was too late. And the one thing you're going to learn anytime about the toy industry is collectors are always there. You want the kids to become collectors. And if you can make this a toy for them to play with, they're going to be your future. And, you know, it's a lot more fun memory too. You know, we were all kids at one time and like to stay that way, no matter how much we hurt or how old we are.
I'd like to thank you. Well, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The Tom Hanks figure. The implication is it never got released.
It was never released. There were 10 that were given to DreamWorks. If my numbers are correct, there were 10 that were scattered throughout the building. And then I was told there were a couple more that were made later.
I know there's a couple in the wild. A friend of mine got one. So
Yeah, there are.
yeah.
You can see Dan's got the one that's the prelim model. There's a bunch of prelim models because when you go at that fast a speed, you actually create more samples than I've ever seen. But yeah, there were some made for the studio, and then there were some made for inside the building. It's not a very big quantity, and I know a few of that, like mine was destroyed, so.
I assume Tom Hanks has one.
I'm sure he does. I'm sure Steven Spielberg has one. But it was too bad because I thought, again, it would have been a good boost to the line. Like we talk about, you need that boost, and somebody made a decision. In this case, it was DreamWorks. I understand it. When I was telling Larry the story, when I saw Saving Private Ryan in San Antonio, there was a young man in the audience, and during the battle scene and toward the end where the bullets are flying, this kid goes, "Oh, that is so fake." There's an old man behind him, grabs him by the hair, pulled him back slowly and said, "It's real. I was there." and lift him back up. And the kid, you could see the change in the kid's face. Karen Baker was with me at the time. She was our PR person. And we stood up, and as we went to leave, we saw the two talk. And here's generations talking about what he just saw. And this guy had been part of D-Day and the storming into France. That's nice, and I wish more of that would happen.
I imagine it's like if you wanted to put out a Schindler's List toy at the same time, a very serious movie that they didn't want associated with toys, probably.
Yeah, I'll tell you once.
It was because it was up for Academy Award for Best Picture, and they didn't want.
Was that the final real
Yeah,
reason?
and
I've
they-
heard
and they
different.
won.
Yeah.
They won, but they didn't want a toy associated with a series because Academy looks really down on anything that's got
Yeah.
merchandise.
Tell you one thing about movies too. Demi Moore, they were doing G.I. Jane, and I gave up my seat to go see the movie. She was there that night. Kipling got my seat, and she came in and plopped in his lap. And the guys from at Hasbro in Cincinnati were like, "Man, we are so glad you weren't the one there that she did that to you. You would not have let her go." And they would have been like, "Can I keep her?" They were really afraid that I would have just been me. So yeah, it was a good line. I wish it was a toy. I wish it had started as a toy. It's Hall of Fame is where it started. The 12-inch. We talked about it yesterday with Target and all that. So this is a legacy to the Hall of Fame, but it should have been a toy. It should never have been. It should have been a collectible line on the side and a toy in the front of the people, and it would have been a better product. If you look back to Action Man in the old days, they did it right, and they had fun, and that's where we wanted it. We did do Action Man. Yeah, you weren't part of that with the Tiger, but again, it just never had the legs that it could have had. I guess it lasted, 5, 6 years, which isn't bad. I'm not going to sit there and complain, but it could have been bigger. So, any other questions? All right. Guys, thank you very much. We really appreciate you're here.
Thank you very much for your interest and for your kind attention and for the fact that you may have collected this toy over the years. And for the cameraman and the sound guy in the back, we appreciate your condolence or your patience with us today, being the last group. And they saved the best for last anyways.
And Greg's not in here. Thanks, Greg, for putting the whole thing on.